Am I here? Are you here? Is anyone here? Can you hear me? Hello? Hello, hello? Hello, 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 hello. Okay. I had to check to make sure it was audible. It didn't ask me anything. If reading aloud was banned on Twitch, why do they have a tag for it? Dun, dun, dun. Da 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 da. Hey, Cubs. Are you there? Am I there? Hi there. So, we're just going to read, I think I was going to do 8 stories. I do have the sound alerts and such turned off for the read, but I'm not going to try to individually record them. It's a little bit harder to do. I will try to keep an eye on the board to see if anyone's talking. I may lag a little because, as usual, my mind is elsewhere. My mind is always everywhere. So, uh, yeah. We get switched over to our story screen after well, let me turn that on. Let me do this. Hello. I know, I look a little stiff. So, as the screen says, I'm reading the Norwegian folklore of Asbjørnsen and Moe. And it's really hard to draw an amber sun. I do try, though. I don't really know how long tonight's going to run. I did just want to choose, let's see, I'm doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stories, which for the book is about 22 pages, so not too bad for my usual reads. And I said, I don't have sound alerts on, but I will be trying to keep an eye on chats. And I may get distracted occasionally. I'll try to type a message if I do. So, the first story we're going to get into is Ashlad, who competed with the troll. Admittedly, a lot of the Ashlad stories will sound similar. So, if you do hear it, just sit back and relax and enjoy listening to the stories. Excuse me. So, this is Ashlad, who competed with the troll. There once was a farmer who had 3 sons. He was living in dire circumstances and is old and frail, and his sons refused to do any work. A splendid big forest belonged to the farm, and the father wanted the boys to fell some of the trees in order to pay his debts. At long last he got them to agree, and the eldest was set off to chop the down trees first. When he got to the forest, he began hacking an old and bearded spruce, a monstrous troll came over to him. "If you chop down any trees in my forest, I will kill you," said the troll. When the boy heard this, he threw down his axe and ran back home as fast as he could. He arrived out of breath and reported what happened. But his father said that the boy had the heart of a rabbit. The trolls have never scared him away from chopping any wood when he was young. The next day, the second son set off, but the same thing happened to him. After he'd made several hacks in the spruce, the troll came to him and said, "If you chop down any trees in my forest, I will kill you." The boy hardly dared even look at the troll. He threw down his axe and took off, just as his brother had done, running as fast as he could. And when he got home, his father was angry and said that the trolls never frightened him away when he was young. On the third day, Ashlad was about to set off. "You," said his two older brothers, "how do you think you'll be able to complete such a task? You've never even set foot outside the house." Ashlad said nothing in reply. He merely asked for plenty of provisions to take along. His mother had no sour milk to give him, so she leaned over the pot to curdle some into cheese for him. She put it in his sack and left. After he'd been chopping for some time, the troll came over to him and said, "If you chop down any trees in my forest, I will kill you." But the boy didn't hesitate. He ran into the forest to get the cheese from his bag and squeezed it so hard that the whey burst out. "If you don't shut up," he shouted at the troll, "I'll squeeze you just like I'm squeezing water out of this white rock." "Oh no, spare me, my friend," said the troll, "and I'll help you chop down some trees." Well, on that condition, the boy spared him. The troll was an expert in the axe, and they felled and chopped dozens of trees that day. As evening approached, the troll said, "You're welcome to come home with me, for it's closer to my house than yours." And that's what the boy did. When they reached the troll's house, they had to make a fire in the fireplace, and the boy was supposed to get water for the porridge pot. But the two iron buckets were too big and heavy that he couldn't even budge them. Then the boy said, "It's not worth carrying thimbles like these. I'm going to bring back the whole well." "Oh no, my dear friend," said the troll. "I don't want to lose my well. You make the fire. I'll get the water." When he came back with the water, they made a big pot of porridge. "It's neither here nor there," said the boy. "But if you're like-minded, how about having an eating contest?" "Oh, yes," replied the troll. He'd always thought he could be good at that. So they sat down at the table. Unnoticed, the boy picked up the leather sack and held it in front of him. When he poured more of the porridge into a sack than he actually ate. When the sack was full, he got out a sheath knife and slit it open. The troll looked at him, but didn't say a word. After they had been eating for a while, the troll put down his spoon and, "Oh, I can't eat another bite," he said. "You have to eat," replied the boy. "I'm only half full. Do what I did and slice a hole in your stomach. Then you'll be able to eat much more." "But won't that hurt horribly?" asked the troll. "Oh, it's nothing worth mentioning," replied the boy. So the troll did as the boy said, and as you might imagine, that proved to be the death of him. Then the boy took all the gold and silver he found there inside the mountain and went back home. And of course, now he had plenty to pay the debts. Ashlad, Ashlad, Ashlad. Oh, you wily young man. Anyway, the next one is about the boy who went to the north wind and demanded the flower back. Does that sound familiar? No, not to me. I don't think I've read that one before. Might recognize it after reading. Anyway. There once was an old woman who had a son. She was very feeble and frail, so the boy was supposed to go out to the storehouse to get some flour for her to make porridge for dinner. But when he came out to the steps of the storehouse, the north wind rushed over to him and grabbed the flour and flew with it into the air. The boy went back into the storehouse to get some more, but when he came to the steps, the north wind again rushed over to him and grabbed the flour. The same thing happened the third time. That made the boy mad. He thought it was unreasonable for the north wind to behave like that, so he decided to seek out the north wind and demand the flour back. Then he set off, but it was a long way. He walked and walked until finally he came to the north wind. "Good day," said the boy. "Good seeing you again." "Good day," replied the north wind. His voice was rough. "Good seeing you, too. What do you want?" he said. "Oh," said the boy, "I want to ask you if you'd kindly return the flour that you took from me at the storehouse steps. We don't have much, and when you behave like that, taking what little we have, there's nothing for us to do but starve to death." "I don't have any flour," said the north wind. "But seeing as you're in such great need, I'll give you a tablecloth that will bring you whatever you want. All you have to do is say, 'Cloth, spread out and let me see all manner of costly foods.'" The boy was quite happy with that, but it was such a long way back that he wouldn't be able to reach home that day, so he stopped at an inn. When he saw that the folks were about to eat supper, he placed the cloth on the table in the corner and said, "Cloth, spread out and let me see all manner of costly foods." No sooner did he say those words than the cloth did as he asked, and everybody thought it was a wondrous thing. But no one was more pleased than the innkeeper's wife. "With a cloth like that," she thought, "I wouldn't have to bother with frying or boiling, with placing or setting, or even with serving and clearing away." As night fell, everyone went to sleep. She took the boy's tablecloth and replaced it with another that looked exactly like the one the north wind had given him, though it couldn't produce an oat less. When the boy awoke, he gathered up his tablecloth and went on his way. That day he returned home to his mother. "So," he said, "I've been to the north wind. He was a reasonable man, for he gave me this tablecloth. When I say, 'Cloth, spread out and let me see all manner of costly foods,' then I will have everything I could ever want to eat." "Well, that may be," said his mother, "but I won't believe it until I see it." The boy hurried to sit down at the table. There he set the cloth and said, "Cloth, spread out and let me see all manner of costly foods." But the cloth didn't produce so much as a scrap of crisp bread. "Well, there's nothing for it. I'll just have to go to the north wind and see again," said the boy. And he set off. Late in the afternoon he arrived at the home of the north wind. "Good evening," said the boy. "Good evening," said the north wind. "I want payment for the flour you took from me. That tablecloth you gave me wasn't worth much." "I don't have any flour," said the north wind, "but here's a goat that will make gold ducats. All you have to say is, 'My goat, make coins.'" The boy was happy with that. but it was such a long way back home that he wouldn't reach it that day, so again he took lodging at the inn. Before he asked anything, he tried out the goat, for he wanted to see if it was true, what the North Wind had said and all. And it turned out to be true enough. But the innkeeper saw what happened. He thought it was a splendid goat. So when the boy was asleep, the innkeeper put in its place another goat that did not make gold ducats. The next morning the boy went on his way, after he returned home to his mother, and said, "The North Wind is a kind man after all. He gave me a goat that can make gold ducats. All I have to say is, my goat, make coins." "Well, that may be," said his mother, "but it could be nothing but talk. I won't believe it until I see it." "My goat, make coins," said the boy, but the goat made not coins. Again he went to see the North Wind. He told the goat was worthless and wanted payment for the flour. "Well, I have nothing more to give you," said the North Wind, "except for that old stick in the corner. When you say, 'My stick, strike,' it will keep striking until you say, 'My stick, stop.'" Again, it was a long way home, so the boy stopped at the inn that night as well. He now realized what must have been happened to the tablecloth and the goat, so when he lay down on the bench, he began to snore once and pretended to be asleep. The innkeeper could tell that the stick also had certain powers. He found another stick that looked the same and was about to swap them, for he could hear the boy snoring. But just as the innkeeper was about to take the stick, the boy shouted, "My stick, strike!" And the stick began beating the innkeeper, making him jump over tables and benches as he shouted and screamed, "Oh, good Lord! Oh, good Lord! Make the stick stop, or it will beat me to death! I'll give you back the tablecloth and the goat!" When the boy decided the innkeeper had suffered enough, he said, "My stick, stop." Then he stuffed the tablecloth into his pocket and picked up the stick, then tied a rope around the goat's horns and took everything home. That was proper payment for the flour. Oh, yeah. If anyone has listened to the rest of the stories I've been doing, these stories are fairly, I would say universal, but European, because Grimm Brothers have done really similar stories. In fact, so far all of these have been about the same, except they just have changed name. So, what? Okay. Sorry, I thought I was getting a message. Okay, the next one. This one is definitely in the Grimm book. The Virgin Mary as Godmother. Now, I know I've read this one in the Grimm stories, but I said fairy tales are fairly universal. So, there once was a poor couple who lived very far, far away in a great forest. The wife gave birth to a beautiful daughter, but they were so poor that they didn't know how they could afford to have the child christened. One day, the husband went out to seek godparents who might be able to pay for the christening. He walked all day, going from person to person. All of them said they would gladly be godparent, but none of them had any money to pay for the christening. In the evening, he was heading back home. He met a lovely lady who wore splendid clothing and looked both kind and good. She offered to have the child christened, but afterwards she would keep the girl. The man replied that he must ask his wife first what she wanted to do. When he got home and told his wife, she said no at once. The next day the man went out again, but no one wanted to be the godparent if they had to pay for the christening. No matter how much he pleaded, it was no good. That evening, as he headed home, he again met the lovely lady who was looking so gentle, and she made the same offer. Again he told his wife what had happened. She said if the next day he found no godparent, then he would have to let the lady take the child, seeing as she looked kind and good. On the third day, the man went out, but he found no one to godparent. In the evening, he once again met the lady kind. He promised to give her the child if she could have her baptized and made a Christian. In the morning, the lady came to the man's house. She was accompanied by two gentlemen, and all three carried the child off to church, where she was christened. Then the lady took the child home with her. There the little girl lived for many years, and her foster mother was always good and kind to her. When the girl was old enough to begin to understand things, her foster mother made ready for her to go away for a while. "You're allowed to go into all the rooms, wherever you like," she told the girl, "except for the 3 chambers that I will show you now." And then she left. The girl couldn't resist peeking into the chambers. Whisk! Out flew a star. When the lady came back, she was very angry with her foster daughter and threatened to send her away. But the child wept and pleaded, and she was allowed to stay. After a while, the foster mother had to go again, and once more she forbade the girl to go into the 2 chambers that she had never been entered before. The girl promised to obey, but after she'd been alone for some time, wondering and pondering what might be inside the 2nd chamber, she couldn't resist opening the door a crack to peek in. Whoosh! Out flew the moon. When the foster mother came back and she saw the moon had slipped out, she was greatly distressed. She told the girl that she could no longer keep her and she would have to send her away. But the girl wept bitterly and pleaded so nicely that once more she was allowed to stay. After a while, the foster mother had to go away again, and this time she sternly warned the girl, who was now nearly grown, that she must not try to enter and look inside the 3rd chamber. When the foster mother had been gone for a while, and the girl had been alone for long enough to feel bored, she thought, how fun it would be to look inside the 3rd chamber. At first, she didn't think she would do it, for her foster mother had warned her not to do so. But the second time the idea occurred to her, she could no longer resist. She thought she must look inside that chamber. She cracked open the door. Whoosh! Out flew the sun. When the foster mother came back this time and saw that the sun had flown out, she was deeply distressed. She said that now the girl would not be allowed to stay. The foster child wept and pleaded even more nicely than before, but it did no good. "Now I will have to punish you," said her foster mother. "I will give you a choice. You can either become the most beautiful woman, but unable to speak, or you must become the ugliest woman and be able to speak. Either way, leave you must." The girl said, "Then I choose to be beautiful." That's what she was, though from that moment she was mute. After leaving her foster mother, The girl wandered into the big forest. No matter how far she walked, the woods never ended. As evening approached, she climbed up into a tall tree and stood right next to a spring. There she settled down and spent the night. Close by was a castle, and early the next morning a maid came out of the castle to get water from the spring to make tea for the prince. The maid saw a lovely face in the spring and thought she was looking at herself. Then she threw away the water bucket and ran back, tossing her head and saying, "If I'm that lovely, then I'm not much good carrying buckets of water. Someone else will have to go and get the water." And she didn't care who that might be. When she got back, she said she was too beautiful to go to the spring to get the prince water. The prince went there himself, for he wanted to find out what had happened. When he reached the spring, he too saw the image in the water, and he looked up. There he caught sight of the lovely girl sitting in the tree. He enticed her down and took her home with him. He dearly wanted her to be his queen, for she was so beautiful. Yet his mother, who was still alive, was not as certain. "The girl can't speak," she said. "She might well be a troll person." But the prince refused to be satisfied until the girl was his. After she lived together for a while, she was expecting a child. When she was about to give birth, the prince ordered a big group of guards to watch over her. Yet when the hour of birth neared, all the guards fell asleep. After the child was born, the girl's foster mother appeared and made a cut in the child's little finger. Then she smeared the blood on the young queen's lips and fingers, saying to her, "Now you shall be distressed as I was when you let out the star." And then she left, taking the child with her. When those who had been ordered to stand guard awoke, they thought the queen had eaten her own child. The old queen wanted to have her burned at the stake, but the prince was so dearly fond of her. In the end, his pleas saved her from punishment, though just barely. The second time the young queen was about to give birth, twice as many guards were ordered to keep watch. The same thing happened as before, except that the foster mother said, "Now you will be distressed as I was when you let out the moon." The young queen begged and pleaded, because when her foster mother was there, she was able to speak. But it did no good. Now the old queen really wanted to have her burned at the stake, but once again the prince's pleas set her free. When the young queen was about to give birth for the third time, the guards around her were tripled, but the same thing happened as before. The foster mother came while the guards slept, cut the child's little finger, and smeared the blood on the queen's lips. And then she said the queen would now be distressed as when she let the sun out. This time the prince could do nothing to save his young queen. She would and must be burned at the stake. But just as she was being led to the bonfire, the foster mother arrived with all three children. Two of them held hands as she led them forward. The third child she carried in her arms. When she went over to the young queen and said, "Here are your children. I'm giving them back to you now. I am the Virgin Mary. And as distressed as you have been, that is how I felt when you let out the sun, the moon, and the star. Now you have suffered enough to know what you did, and from now on, you will be able to speak." Everyone can surely imagine that no one can really saw how happy the young queen and her prince were after that. Since that time, they have always been happy, and from that day on, even the prince's mother was fond of the young queen. Because, gotta impress the mom-in-law. Honestly, a lot of the stories are almost the same as the Grimm ones. That just means that the stories do travel, which, is kind of cool. Actually, Asbjørnsen and Moe might as well be the Grimm brothers, as they essentially did the same thing for their respective regions, and they all documented essentially the same stories. It'd be interesting to find out who wrote them first, though. So, let's see, that is... that was 3 of the stories. Got 5 more to go. I'm going to get one more real quick before we take a break. The 3 Princesses in the White Land. So, there once was a fisherman who lived close to a castle and caught fish for the king's table. One day, while he was out fishing, he caught nothing at all. No matter what he did with his fishing pole and line, he caught not even a bone on his hook. As the day wore on, a head popped out of the water and said, "If you'll give me what your wife carries under her belt, you will have plenty of fish." The man quickly agreed, and he didn't know that his child was expecting. He didn't know that his wife was expecting a child. That day he did catch fish, as many as he could ever want. When he got home that evening, he told his wife how he'd managed to catch so many fish. She began to wail and weep. She asked God to save and preserve her from the promise her husband had made, for she told him now she carried a child under the belt. Word soon reached the castle that the woman was greatly distressed. When the king heard about this and was asked, he promised to take the child to make sure it was safe. The days came and went. When it was time, the woman gave birth to a son. Then the king took him and raised him as his own until the boy was fully grown. One day the boy asked for permission to accompany his fisherman father out when he went fishing. He said he had such a deep yearning to do that. The king was reluctant to agree, but in the end, the boy was granted permission. He set off with his father, and things went all fine all day, until they came on shore in the evening. That's when the boy noticed that he'd forgotten his handkerchief, and he wanted to go back to the boat to get it. The instant he climbed into the boat started moving so fast on its own that the water surged all around. No matter how hard the boy pulled the oars, it did no good. The boat kept going all night, and finally the boy ended up far, far away, close to a white beach. Then he went ashore. After he walked a while, he met an old man with a long white beard. "What is this place called?" asked the boy. "Whiteland," replied the man. Then he asked the boy where he was from and where he was headed, and the boy told him. "Well," said the man, "if you continue along the shore, you will come upon 3 princesses who are buried in the ground, so only their heads are visible. The first one, she's the oldest, will call to you and ask you if you ever go over to them and help them. Hurry past them. If you don't hear or see them, then go over to the 3rd princess and do as she asked. That will bring you good luck." "Yes, it will." When the boy came to the first of the princesses, she called to him and asked him ever so nicely to come and help her. but he walked past as if he couldn't see her. He did the same with the second. Then he went over to the third princess. "If you do as I say, you can have any of us you like," said the princess. He agreed gladly, so she told him that 3 trolls had buried all 3 princesses in the ground. Before that, they all lived in the castle, and they could see in the forest. "Go into the castle and let the trolls beat you. 1 night for each of us," she said. "If you manage to endure all that, you will rescue us." "All right," replied the boy, and he agreed to try. "When you go inside," the princess went on, "you'll find 2 lions standing in the doorway, but if you walk right between them, they won't harm you. Then go straight into a small dark room. That's where you must lie down. Then a troll will come and beat you. But take the flask that is hanging on the wall and smear what's inside the places where he struck you. Then you'll be as good as new. Grab the sword that's hanging next to the flask and strike the troll dead." He agreed to do as the princess said. He walked between the lions as if he didn't see them, and went straight into the small chamber where he lay down. On the first night, the troll with 3 heads and 3 whips came and beat the boy terribly. But he bore it bravely, and when the troll was done, the boy took what was inside the flask and smeared it on himself. Then he grabbed the sword and struck the troll dead. When he went out the next morning, the princesses were still stuck in the ground, but only up to their waists. The second night proceeded the same way, but this troll had 6 heads and 6 whips, and the boy beat the boy even worse than the first one had done. When the boy came out the next morning, the princesses were still stuck in the ground, though only up to their calves. On the third night, the troll who appeared had 9 heads and 9 whips, and he beat and lashed the boy for so long that he finally fainted. Then the troll picked the boy up and threw him against the wall, making the flask fall down. What was inside poured all over the boy, so that he was good as new. Then he didn't hesitate. He grabbed the sword and struck the troll dead. The next morning he came out of the castle. The princesses were no longer stuck in the ground. Then he took the youngest of them as his queen, and they lived happily, well, for a long time. But eventually he longed to go home to see his parents. His queen was not pleased with this, but his longing was so great that he decided to leave, and leave he must. Then she said to him, "You must promise me one thing. You will do only what your father asks, and not what your mother asks." He promised. Then she gave him a ring and said that everyone who wore such a ring could wish for any 2 things he liked. So he wished that he was home. His parents could hardly believe how splendid and handsome he looked. After he'd been home for a few days, his mother wanted him to go up to the castle and show the king what a man he'd become. The father said, "No, that's not something he should do, for when he's there, we'll miss the pleasure of his company." But it did no good. His mother begged and pleaded for so long that the young king agreed to go. When he came to the castle, he looked more splendid in his clothes and his bearing than any other king, who wasn't terribly pleased about this. He said, "Well, here you can see what my queen looks like, but I can't see yours. Your queen must not be so lovely after all. If only she stood here, you could see for yourself," the young king said, and in a flash, there she stood. But his queen was greatly distressed and said to him, "Why didn't you obey me and heed what your father said? Now I'll have to go right back home, and you've used up both your wishes." And with that she tied the ring to his hair that was engraved with her name. Then she wished herself home. The young king was deeply distressed. Day in and day out, he thought only of how he could get back home to his queen. "I need to see if I can find out where White Land is," he thought, and set off into the world. After he'd walked for a while, he came to a mountain, where he met a man who was master of all the animals in the forest, for they came whenever he blew his horn. The young king asked him about Whiteland. "I don't know," the man said, "but I'll ask my animals." Then he summoned them by blowing his horn, and he asked if any of them knew where Whiteland was, but none of them did. Then the man gave the young king a pair of skis. "When you put these on," he said, "they'll take you to my brother, who lives 1,000 miles from here. He's the master of all the birds in the sky, so go ask him. When you get there, just turn the skis around and make the tips point this way, and then they'll go home all on their own." When the young king arrived, he turned the skis around, just as the master of the animals had said, and they went back home. He asked again about the White Land. The man blew his horn to summon all the birds, and then he asked if they knew where the White Land was. No, none of them did. Long after the others had arrived, an old eagle appeared. She had been gone for close to 10 years, and even she didn't know. "Well, well," said the man. "I'm going to lend you a pair of skis. When you put them on, they'll take you to my brother, who lives 1,000 miles from here. He is the master of all the fish in the sea, so you should ask him. But don't forget to turn the skis around." The young man thanked him, and he put on the skis. When he came to the master of all the fish in the sea, he turned the skis around, and they went back home just like the others had done. Again, he asked about the Whiteland. The man blew his horn to summon all the fish, but none of them knew anything. Finally, an old pike appeared. It had taken the man great effort to summon her. When the young king asked the pike his question, she said, "Oh yes, I know it well. That's where I've been to cook these 10 past years. Tomorrow I'll go back because the queen, whose king disappeared, is going to marry another." "If that's the case, then let me give some advice," said the man to the young king. "Over in the marsh there are 3 brothers who've been out there for 100 years, arguing over a hat, a walking stick, and a pair of boots. Anyone who acquires all 3 things will be able to make himself invisible and wish himself as far away as he likes. Tell them that you want to try out all 3 things, and afterward you'll settle the dispute for them." The young king thanked the man, and did just as he said. "What is it that you've been arguing about forever and a day?" he said to the brothers. "Let me try out those things, and afterward I'll settle the dispute for you." They gladly agreed, but when he'd given them the hats, the walking stick, and his boots, the young king said, "Till next time we meet, I'll tell you my decision." And then he wished himself away. As he flew through the air, he happened upon the North Wind. "Where are you headed?" "To Whiteland," said the young king, and with that the old North Wind told the North Wind what happened. "Well," said the North Wind, "I can certainly get there a little faster. I'll send blasts and gusts into every corner. When you get there, stand on the steps next to the door, and I'll come rushing over if you want to blow down the whole castle. When the prince who's supposed to marry your queen comes out to see what's going on, seize him by the scruff of the neck and throw him out. Then I'll do my best to whisk him away." The young king did just as the North Wind said. He stood on the steps when the North Wind came in, racing and roaring and pounding against the wall of the castle so it shook. Then the prince came out to see what was going on. Instantly the young king seized him by the scruff of the neck and threw him out. Then the North Wind carried him off. After the young king was rid of the prince, he went inside the castle. At first the queen didn't recognize him, for he had grown thin and pale from wandering so long and suffering such sorrow. But when she showed her ring, she was overjoyed. Then a proper wedding was celebrated, and news of their marriage spread far and wide. That's pretty nice. Okay. Let's see. That's up to page 41. 9 more pages. I'm reading this far too fast. I feel like I'm just going to do this in like an hour. But, I'm reading until the story's there, so I haven't taken the break yet. So anyway, let's see. This next story is 4 pages. Okay, I'm going to try to get through this one. And I will say that the title of the story is Some Women Are Like That. Okay. There once was a man and a woman who were going to sow their fields, but they had no seeds and no money to buy any. All they had was a single cow. The man was supposed to go into town to sell the cow to get money for seeds, but when it came right down to it, the woman didn't dare let the husband go. She was afraid he'd drink up all the money. She decided to set off with the cow herself, and she took along a hen as well. Close to town, she met a butcher. "Are you going to sell the cow, ma'am?" he asked. "Yes, I certainly am," she said. "How much do you want for it?" "I need to have a mark for the cow, and you can have the hen for $10, she said. "Well," he said, "I have no use for the hen, but I can sure sell the cow when it gets to town. I'll give you a mark for the cow." So she sold him the cow. He gave her a mark. But nobody in town wanted to pay $10 for the scrawny, mangy hen. Then she went back to the butcher and said, "I can't get rid of this hen, sir. You'd better take it off my hands, since you already took the cow." "I'm sure I can manage that," said the butcher. He invited her to sit at the table and gave her food and offered her so much liquor to drink that she ended up in a drunken stupor. While the woman slept it off, the butcher dipped her in a barrel of tar and rolled her in a pile of feathers. When she awoke, she was covered in feathers. She began to wonder, "Is this me or not me? Oh no, it can't be me. It must be a big strange bird. But what should I do when I find out that it's not me or not? I know, I'll figure out what I am. When I get home, if the cows lick me and the dog doesn't bark at me, then it's me." The dog hardly caught sight of this beast before it began barking up a storm, as if thieves and scoundrels were coming to the farm. "So this very well can't be me," said she. When she went to the cowshed, the cows refused to lick her, for they smelled the tar. "So this can't very well be me. It must be a strange bird," the woman said. Then she crawled up to the roof of the storehouse and began flapping her arms as if they were wings and tried to fly. When her husband saw this, he came out with his rifle and took aim. "Oh, don't shoot, don't shoot," shouted his wife. "It's me." "Is that you?" said her husband. "Well, don't stand up there like a goat. Come down here and give me a true and proper account of what happened to you." So, climbing back down, but she didn't have a skilling. In her drunken state, she'd thrown away the mark to a butcher he had paid her. When her husband heard this, he said, "You're twice as crazy as you were before." So he was furious and said that he'd leave everything behind and never come back unless he met 3 women who were just as crazy as she was. When her husband... oh, he set off. After he'd gone some distance along the road, he caught sight of a woman running in and out of a newly built hut. She was carrying an empty basin. Before she ran inside each time, she would throw the apron over the basin, as if there were something inside it. She dumped whatever it was inside onto the floor. "Why are you doing that, ma'am?" "Oh, I just wanted to bring in a little sunshine," she replied, "but I can't figure out how to do it. When I'm outdoors, there's sunshine in the basin, but when I come inside, it seems to have fallen out. When I lived in my old hut, I had plenty of sunshine, even though I never brought even a little bit in. If only someone could get me some sunshine, I would gladly give him $300. "If you have an axe," said the man, "I'll be sure to get you some sunshine." The woman gave him an axe, and he chopped holes in the wall to make windows, but that was something the builders had forgotten to do. Instantly, the sun shone inside, and he got his $300. "That's the first crazy woman," thought the man. He set off again. After a while, he came to a house where terrible screaming and howling was coming from inside. He went in and caught sight of a woman who was hitting her husband on the head with a wooden club. Over his head, she had put a shirt that had no neck opening. "Are you trying to kill your husband, ma'am?" he asked. "No, I'm just trying to put a neck opening in a shirt." Her husband screamed and carried on. "God save and preserve anyone who can put a hole in your shirt. If someone can teach this woman of mine to make a neck opening in a shirt in some other way, I would gladly give him $300. "That is easily done. Just give me a pair of scissors," said the man. With the scissors, he cut a hole in the shirt and set off once again with the money. "That's the second crazy woman," he thought to himself. At long last he came to a farm. He thought he would get rest there for a while, so he went inside. "Where are you from, sir?" asked the woman. "I'm from the kingdom of Bevan," he replied. "Oh my! Oh my! Are you from the kingdom of heaven? Then surely you must know Per, the second and blessed husband of mine." The woman had been married 3 times. The first and third were horrible men. That's why she called the second one her blessed husband, for he was the only one who had been kind to her. "Oh, yes, I know him well," said the man who walked around. "How is he doing?" asked the woman. "Oh, he's doing poorly," said the man from Bevan. "He wanders from farm to farm with no food or money and no clothes to wear, not to mention any money." "God have mercy on him," cried the woman. "There's no need for him to go around in such a miserable state, for he left so much behind. A big loft is filled with clothes that belong to him, and there's a big chest of coins, too. If you will take those along to him, I'll give you a horse and a wagon to carry them. He can keep the horse, and he can drive from farm to farm. There's no need for him to walk." She gave the man from Bevan a whole wagon load of clothes, a chest filled with shiny silver coins, and as much food and drink as he wanted. Then he put everything in the wagon, climbed in, and went on his merry way. Well, that's the third crazy woman. The woman's third husband was out plowing the field when he caught sight of the stranger leaving with a horse and a wagon full of goods. He went straight home. When he asked the woman about the man who'd ridden off with the blue-black horse, "Oh, him. That was a man from the kingdom of heaven. He said that things were bad for Per, his second blessed husband of mine, that walks from farm to farm and has no clothes or money. So sent the mine off with all the clothes that used to belong to Per, and all the money that belonged to him as well, and silver coins." The husband realized at once what had happened. He saddled a horse and rushed off at a full gallop. It didn't take long for him to close on the stranger who was driving the wagon. But when the man noticed this, he drove the wagon into a thicket, grabbed the fistful of horsehair off the hoof, and ran up the hill. There he tied the horse to a tree branch. Then he lay down under the tree and began gawking and staring up at the clouds. "No, no, no," he cried, as if to Per, the third husband, riding up. "No, I've never seen anything so peculiar. I've never seen the like." Per stood there, looking down at the stranger for a while, wondering whether he was crazy or what it could mean. Finally he said, What is it you're gawking at while lying down there on the ground? Oh, I've never seen the like, said the man. Someone is going straight up to heaven with a black-blue horse. Have a look. There's horsehair on the birch. And up there on the clouds you can see the blue-black horse. Pear looked up at the clouds and then at the man and said, I don't see anything but some horsehair on the birch tree. Oh, no, you can't see it from there. Come, over here and lay down and look up, but don't take your eyes off the clouds. Per the third lay down and looking up at the clouds so hard that his eyes filled with tears. Then the man from Bevan took Pear's horse, mounted it, and rode with both the other horse and the loaded wagon. When the third heard the rumbling of the road and jumped to his feet, but he was so confused by the sights that the stranger took off riding with his horse that he didn't even think to chase until it was too late. Pear was not a particularly brave man, let me tell you, so when he came home to the woman and asked what he'd done with her horse, he said, I gave it to a stranger for Pear the Second. I didn't think it was right for him to sit in a wagon, clattering from one farm to another in the kingdom of heaven. Now he can sell the wagon and buy himself a carriage instead. Well, I'm grateful to you for that. Never did I think you were such a man in the kingdom. When the man came home after collecting $600 and a wagon load of clothes and coins, I saw that all the fields had been plowed and sown. The first thing he did was ask his wife where she'd gotten the seeds. Oh, she said, I've always heard that you shall reap what you sow, and I decided to sow the salt the north wind brought here. Now, if only we get some rain soon, I'm sure it'll sprout again. Crazy you are, and crazy you will always be, for as long as you may live, said her husband. But that's neither here nor there, for the others are no better than you. That's, I have to say that's kind of a sexist story, but wouldn't be crazy, yeah? Okay. So it's... not very many pages left. So, well, this one's about normal. Everyone thinks their own children are best. This is a very short one. So, a hunter was once walking through the forest when he came upon a woodcock. My dear friend, don't shoot my children, said the woodcock. Which birds are your children? Asked the hunter. The loveliest ones in the forest are mine, replied the woodcock. All right, those are the ones I won't shoot, said the hunter. But when he came back, he was carrying a whole clutch of woodcock fledglings that he'd shot. Oh no, why did you shoot at my children after all? Said the woodcock. Are these yours? Asked the hunter. I shot the ugliest birds I could find. Alas, replied the woodcock, don't you know everyone thinks their own children are best? It's true. I'm sure if I had kids, I'd think they were probably the best too. Anyway, the next one is a tale of courtship. There once was a boy who set off to find himself a wife. Among the places he visited was a farm where folks were terribly shabby and poor. As you might well imagine, when the suitor arrived, they wanted to appear well-to-do, of course, so the man managed to get one new sleeve made for his shirt. Sit down, he said to the suitor. Oh, but there's so much dust everywhere, and he went about rubbing and swatting the benches and taking off his new sleeve. The other arm he held behind his back. The woman had managed to get one new shoe, so she kept stretching out and kicking everything at the stools and chairs. There's so many things in the way. What a mess it is, she said. When they called their daughter to come and tidy up, she had managed to get a new cap. That's why she only stuck her head in the door, nodding this way and that. I can't be everywhere at once, you know, she said. Oh, yes, The folks are certainly well-to-do on that farm where the suitor came to visit. Okay, that went by a little bit faster than I expected. And I got one more story that I was going to do. I'll check how long the bit of sun is. Wood of Sun is 7 pages. I might consider doing that one. Let's see how things go. Oh, I'm going to take a short break anyway. Message. Ouch. Sorry. Get my mic so I'm not destroying your heads. Let me. Do I have music? Okay, Cubs, I'm back. You miss me? No? Okay. That's fine. I know I miss you guys when I'm not hearing or seeing you. So, always. Alright. Next story for tonight is The Three Ants. Ants. There once was a poor man who had a hut deep in the forest and lived on whatever he could hunt. He had one daughter, and she was both lovely and fair. The mother had died when the child was quite young, but the girl was now half grown. She said she wanted to go seek out folks who she could learn to make her living. Yes, my daughter, said her father. It's true enough that I've taught you how to pluck and fry birds. You must still learn how to make your living. So the girl set out to find herself a job. After she'd walked for a while, she came to the royal palace, and that's where she stayed. The queen favored her so highly that the other maids grew jealous of her. They told the queen that the girl had boasted that she could spin a pound of flax into 24 hours. So the queen was especially fond of all sorts of handiwork. Well, if you said that, then that's what you shall do, the queen told the girl, though I'll grant you a little more time than that. The poor girl didn't dare say she'd never learned to spin. She merely asked the chamber all her own. She was given the chamber along with a spinning wheel and flax, which were carried inside. There she sat, weeping and distressed, for she had no idea what to do. She studied the spinning wheel, twisting and turning it, but she didn't know how to use it. She'd never seen a spinning wheel before. As she sat there, an old woman came into the room. "What's wrong, my child?" she asked. "Oh," said the girl, "it will do no good for me to tell you. I'm sure you won't be able to help me." "You don't know that," said the woman. "It may well be that I could give you good advice." The girl thought, I might as well tell her. So she told the woman how the other maids had reported that she'd boasted about being able to spin a pound of flax in 24 hours. "Poor girl, that I am," she said. "I've never in all my days seen a spinning wheel, much less learned how to spin so much flax in a day and a night." "Well, don't worry about that, my child," said the woman. "If you call me your aunt on your wedding day, then I'll spin the flax for you. You can just go over there and lie down to sleep." The girl gladly agreed. Then she lay down to sleep. In the morning, when she woke up, the spun flax lay on the table, and both looked fine and lovely. No one had ever seen yarn so beautiful and so evenly spun. The queen was terribly pleased with the beautiful yarn, so she grew even more fond of the girl than before. The others grew even more jealous of her. They decided to tell the queen that now the girl had boasted that in 24 hours she could weave all the yarn she had spun. Again, she didn't dare say no. She asked for a chamber all her own, then said she would try her best. There she sat once more, weeping and carrying on. She didn't know what she was going to do. Then another old woman came in and said, "What's wrong, my child?" At first the girl didn't want to explain, but finally she told the old woman why she was sad. "Well," said the old woman, "don't worry about that. If you will call me your aunt on your wedding day, I'll do the weaving for you. You can just go over there and lie down to sleep." The girl agreed gladly, and she lay down to sleep. When she woke, a bundle of cloth lay on the table, woven as finely and evenly as any weaving could be. The girl picked up the bundle and took to the queen, who was very pleased with the weaving. She grew even more fond of the girl, but the others grew even more jealous of her. All they could think of was what they were going to do next. When they finally told the queen that the girl had now boasted that in 24 hours she could sew a bundle of cloth into shirts. The same thing happened as before. The girl didn't dare say that she couldn't sew. Once again she went to her own chamber and sat there weeping in great distress. Then another old woman appeared. She promised to do the sewing if the girl would say that she was her aunt on her wedding day. The girl was more than happy to promise. Then she did as the woman said and lay down to sleep. In the morning when she awoke, she found a bundle of shirts lying on the table. No one had ever seen such beautiful seams before. The shirts were finely sewn and lovely to behold. When the queen saw this handiwork, she was practically in stitches with joy and clapped her hands. "Never have I seen or been given such beautifully sewn shirts," she said. By then she was fond of the girl as if she were her own child. "If you wish to have a prince, then you shall have him," the queen said to the girl, "for you never need hire out any of work. You can do all the sewing and spinning and weaving yourself." Oh, jeez. When the girl was beautiful and the prince found her pleasing, their wedding was held at once. The moment the prince sat down at the wedding table with his bride, an old, ugly woman appeared. Her nose looked to be a foot long. When the bride stood up and curtsied and said, "Good day, aunt." "Is she the aunt of my bride?" said the prince. "Yes, she certainly was." "Well, then she must take a seat at the table," said the prince. Yet both he and everyone else thought she was a vile person to have at the table. All of a sudden, another old and ugly woman came in. Her backside was so fat and wide she could barely squeeze through the door. At once the bride got up to greet her. "Good day, aunt." Again the prince asked if this was the aunt of his bride. Both replied yes. The prince said that if that was the case, she too should take a seat at the table. Hardly had she sat down before another old and ugly woman appeared. Her eyes were as big as plates, and so red and watery that they were a terrible sight to behold. Again the bride stood up and greeted her. "Good day, aunt." The prince invited her to have a seat at the table too, but he wasn't happy, and he thought to himself, "God help me, what horrible aunts my bride has." After he'd sat there for a while, and he couldn't stand it any longer, and asked, "How in the world can my bride, who is so lovely, have such vile and deformed-looking aunts?" "I will tell you," said one of them. "I was just as beautiful as your bride when I was her age, but the reason I have such a long nose is because I've sat bending and bowing over my spinning wheel. My nose stretched and stretched until it grew as long as you see it now." "And ever since I was young," said the second old woman, "I've sat and slid back and forth on my bench for the loom. That's how my backside got this wide and swole as you see it now." Then the third woman said, "From the time I was a child I've sat and stared and sewed all night and all day. That's why my eyes have grown so foul and red, and nothing more can be done about them." "I see," said the prince. "I'm glad I found out about this. If that's how folks become so ugly and vile, then my bride will never spin, weave, or sew for the rest of her life." Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and do one more for the night. This one is... Ouch. Damn, hand cramp. Holding this book. Okay, Cubs. Last one. The Widow's Son. That wasn't on mine. Okay. Anyway, The Widow's Son. There once was an oh so poor widow who had one son. She toiled for the boy's sake until he was confirmed. That's when she told him that she could no longer feed him, and he would have to go out to earn his own living. Then the boy set out into the world. After he'd walked for a day or two, he met a stranger. "Where are you headed?" asked the man. "I'm going out into the world to find work," said the boy. "Would you like to work for me?" "I suppose so. It might as well be work for you as anyone else," replied the boy. "I'll treat you well," said the man. "All you have to do is keep me company, and nothing else." The boy went with the man, and he lived well. There was plenty to eat and drink, and he had next to nothing to do. But he saw no one except the man. One day the man said to him, "I'll be away for 8 days. During this time you'll stay here at home alone. And you mustn't go into any of these 4 rooms. If you do, I'll kill you when I come back." "Oh, no," said the boy. He wouldn't do that. But when the man had gone 3 or 4 days, the boy could no longer resist. And he went into one of the chambers. He looked around, but only saw a shelf above the door. On the shelf was a sweetbriar branch. "I wonder why I was sternly forbidden to look at that," thought the boy. When the 8 days were up, the man came home. "You haven't been inside any of the chambers, have you?" he said. "No, I haven't," said the boy. "Well, I'll soon see if you have." And with that he went into the room where the boy had been. "Oh, yes, you've been in here after all, and now you will lose your life." When the boy wept and pleaded, and he escaped with his life, but he was given a proper beating. When that was over, they were just as good friends as before. A little while later, the man again had to go away. This time he would be gone for 14 days. He told the boy not to set foot in any of the chambers he'd never been inside, though he was welcome to go into the one he'd already entered. Well, the same thing happened as before, except the boy had managed to wait 8 days before going to another room. This chamber, again, he saw only a shelf above the door. But on this shelf was a big rock and a flask of water. "I wonder what's so scary about that," thought the boy. When the man came home, he asked the boy if he'd been inside any of the rooms. "No," said the boy again. He hadn't. "Well, I'll soon see if you have." With that, the man discovered the boy had been inside another room after all. He said, "I'm not going to spare you any more. Now you'll lose your life." The boy wept and pleaded, and again he escaped with only a beating. But a terrible beating it was, almost as more than he could bear. After he'd recovered, he lived just as well as before. And he and the man were just as good friends as before. A little while later, the man again had to go away. This time he would be gone for 3 weeks. So he said to the boy that if he went inside the 3rd chamber, he would give up on any thought of living. After 14 days had passed, the boy couldn't resist any longer, and he slipped inside. but he saw nothing in the room except a hatch in the floor. When he lifted up the hatch and looked down, he saw below a big copper cauldron bubbling and boiling, though he could see no fire underneath. "It would be amusing to find out if it's hot," said the boy. And he stuck his finger in the cauldron. When he pulled his finger out, it was completely gilded. The boy washed and scrubbed the gilding, but it wouldn't come off, so he wrapped the rag round his finger. When the man came home, he asked the boy what was wrong with his finger. The boy said he had cut himself badly, but the man tore off the rag, and then saw quite clearly what had happened to the boy's finger. At first, he wanted to kill the boy, but when he wept and pleaded again, the man merely beat him so hard that he lay in bed for 3 days. Then the man took a pot down from the wall and smeared what was left inside on the boy, and he was as good as new. After a while, the man again had to go away, and he wouldn't be back for a month. He told the boy that if he went inside the 4th chamber, he should give up all thought of living. For 1, 2, and 3 weeks, the boy resisted, but then he couldn't hold out any longer. He would and must go inside that chamber. So he slipped inside. There he saw a big black horse in a stall, with a trough for embers near its head and a basket of hay near its tail. The boy thought this was wrong, so he switched them around, and he set the hay basket near the horse's head. Then the horse said, "Seeing as you are good-hearted and that you want to make sure I have food to eat, I'm going to rescue you. When the troll comes home and finds you, he will try to kill you. Now go to the chamber right across from this one, and take a suit of armor from those you'll find hanging there. But be sure not to let any of the shiny ones. Take the rustiest armor you can find. Do the same with sword and saddle." So that's what the boy did, though he found everything heavy to carry. When he came back, the horse told him to take off his clothes and get into the cauldron that was boiling in the 2nd chamber. There he could wash himself well. "Oh, how vile I'm going to look," thought the boy, but he did just the same. After he was washed, he looked both handsome and hardy, as red and white as blood and milk, and much stronger than before. "Did you notice anything different?" asked the horse. "Yes," said the boy. "Try to lift me," said the horse. Oh, yes, he could do that. He could also swing the sword as if it weighed nothing. "All right, put the saddle on me," said the horse, "and get into the armor. Gather up the sweetbriar branch and the rock and the flask of water and the pot of grease, and then we'll be off." When the boy was sitting astride the horse, it set off, though he had no idea how far they made their way forward. After they'd been traveling for a while, the horse said, "I think I hear a roaring sound. Look behind us. Can you see anything?" "There's a big group behind us. There must be at least 20 in that group," said the boy. "Oh, yes, that's the troll," said the horse, "and he's bringing his followers." They kept on riding until those behind began to drag closer. "Throw the sweetbriar branch over your shoulder," said the horse, "but be sure to throw it far away from me." With that, the boy did, and a big, thick sweetbriar forest instantly sprang up. The boy kept riding farther and farther, while the troll had to go back home and get something to chop a path through the forest. After a while, the horse said again, "Look back. Can you see anything now?" "Yes, a big crowd," said the boy. "As big a crowd as the way to church." "Oh, yes, that's the troll. Now he's brought more followers with him. Throw the big rock, but be sure to throw it far away from me." The instant the boy did that, what the horse said, a big mountain appeared behind them, and the troll had to go back home to get something to chop his way through the mountain. While the troll was doing that, the boy kept riding a good distance ahead. Then the horse asked again to look back, and he saw what looked like an entire army swarming after them. The group was so shiny that it glowed. "Yes," said the horse, "that's the troll. Now he's brought all of his followers with him. Dump out the water behind us in the flask, but be very careful not to spill any on me." With that, the boy did, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't help but spilling a few drops on the horse's hindquarters. Then a big lake appeared, but the spilled drops meant that the horse ended up standing in the middle of the lake, yet it was able to swim to shore. When the trolls came to the lake, they lay down and began to drink it dry, but they slurped up so much water that they burst. "Now we're rid of them," said the horse. After that they journeyed for a long time. They came to a green clearing in the forest. "Take off all the armor and put on your tattered clothes," said the horse. "Then remove the saddle and let me go. Hang everything inside the big hollow-limbed tree. Then make a wig for yourself out of spruce lichen and go up to the royal palace you'll find nearby. There you must ask for work. Wherever you need me, just come here and shake my bridle. Then I'll come to you." Boy did just as the horse said. But after he'd put on the lichen wig, he looked so wretched and pale and miserable that no one would ever recognize him. Then he went to the royal palace and asked if he might work in the kitchen, carrying water or wood for the cook. The kitchen maid asked him, "Why are you wearing that ugly wig? Take it off. I won't have anyone so ugly in here." "I can't," said the boy. "I may have a few lice in my hair." "Do you think I'd let you stay near the food if that's how things are?" said the cook. "Go see the stable master. You're better suited for mucking out the stables." But when the stable master asked the boy to take off his wig, he heard the same thing. But he didn't want him either. "Go see the gardener," he said. "You're better suited for digging the earth." The gardener allowed the boy to stay, but some of the other servants wanted to share a bed with him. He had to sleep alone under the steps of the gazebo, which was perched on posts. Underneath, the boy gathered some moss for a bed, and there he lay down where he could best. After he'd been at the royal palace for a while, the boy took off the lichen wig to wash himself, just as the sun rose one morning. At that moment he was so handsome that he was a delight to behold. From her window the princess saw the gardener boy and thought she'd never seen anyone so handsome. She asked the gardener why the boy slept under the steps. "Oh, none of the other servants would share a bed with him," said the gardener. "Tonight let him come here and lie down next to the door inside my chamber. After that the servants won't think they're so good to share quarters with him," said the princess. The gardener said as much to the boy. "Do you think I should do that?" said the boy. "I said there's something between me and the princess." "Ha! I'm sure you have no reason to fear such suspicions," replied the gardener. "A handsome boy like you." "Well, since you're ordering me to do it, I suppose I must," said the boy. While he was making his way up the stairs that night, he stamped and stomped so hard that they had to ask him to move more quietly, or the king might hear. He went inside the chamber and lay down. There he began snoring at once. When the princess said to her maid, "Sneak over there and take off the lichen wig." The maid obeyed, but as she was about to snatch off the wig, the boy held on to it with both hands and said she mustn't do that. Then he lay down again and began snoring. The princess motioned to her wit to try again. This time she snatched off the wig, There lay the boy, so lovely and red and white, just as the princess had seen him in the morning sun. After that, the boy slept in the princess's room every night. It wasn't long before the king heard that the gardener boy was sleeping in the princess's chamber every night. He grew so angry that he nearly had the boy killed, but he didn't. Instead, he threw the boy into the prison tower, then he locked his own daughter in her chamber. She was never allowed to come out, night or day. No matter how much she wept or pleaded for herself and for the boy, it did no good. The king just grew angrier. A short time later, war and unrest descended upon the land. The king had to arm himself against another king who wanted to seize his kingdom. When the boy heard this, he told the prison guard to go to the king and ask that he might be given armor and a sword. He wanted permission to take part in the war. Everyone laughed when the prison guard delivered this message to the king. Then they asked if the boy might be given some broken old armor. Then they'd have fun seeing him try to take it apart that way. This was granted along a miserable old nag that limped along on 3 legs, dragging its fourth behind. Then they all set off to battle the enemy. They hadn't gone far from the royal palace before the boy and his nag got stuck in a bog. There he sat, calling and coaxing the nag. "Hey, get moving! Hey, get moving!" Everyone else thought this was grand fun. They laughed and jeered at the boy as they rode past. No sooner were they gone than he ran over to the lead tree and put on his armor and shook his bridle. The horse appeared at once and said, "Do your best, and I will do the same." Then the boy caught up with the others. The battle had already begun. The king was in dire situation, and in no time the boy chased the enemy far away. The king and his men all wondered who the stranger could be. He had come to their aid, but no one got close enough to speak to him, and when the battle was over, he was gone. When everyone rode back, the boy was still stuck in the bog, calling and coaxing the 3-legged nag. Again they laughed. "Oh, look, that fool's still here," they said. The next day, when they set off, the boy was still there. Again they laughed and cheered him, but no sooner had they gone past than the boy ran over to the lighten tree, and everything happened the same way as before. Everyone wondered who the stranger could be, this champion who had come to their aid, but no one got close enough to be able to speak to him, and of course no one guessed it was the boy. When they went home that evening and saw the boy still sitting on the nag, they laughed at him again. The man shot an arrow that struck the boy in the leg. He began screaming and wailing so terribly that the king tossed the boy a handkerchief to bind his wound. When they set off the third morning, the boy was still stuck in the bog. "Hey, get moving! Hey, get moving!" he said to the nag. "He's going to sit there until he starves to death," said the king's men as they rode past. They laughed so hard at the boy that they nearly fell off their horses. When they were gone, the boy again ran over to the lighten tree and joined the battle at the crucial moment. That day he killed the enemy king. With that, the war came to an end. When the battle was over, the king caught sight of this handkerchief, which the stranger had tied around his leg. Then the king recognized him. With great joy, they took the boy back to the royal palace. The princess saw him from the top of her window and was happy beyond belief. "Here comes my sweetheart." Then the boy took the pot of grease and smeared his leg. He did the same to all those who were wounded. In an instant, they were all as good as new. After that, he was allowed to marry the princess. On the day of the wedding, the boy went to the stable to get his horse. He found the animal moping and hanging its head. He refused to eat a thing. Then the young king, for by all then he was king and had given half the kingdom, he spoke to the horse and asked what was wrong. The horse said, "Now that I've done all I could to help you, I no longer want to live. You must take the sword and chop off my head." "Oh no, I won't do that," said the king. "But you shall have anything you want, and you will never have to go anywhere again." "Well, if you don't do as I say, I will find some way to put an end to you," said the horse. And then the young king had to agree. As he raised his sword and was about to chop off the horse's head, he was so distressed that he looked away. He didn't want to see the sword strike. But no sooner had the head chopped off, the horse's head stood the loveliest prince where the horse had been standing. "Why on earth did you come from?" said the young king. "I was the horse," replied the prince. "I used to be king of a land where the other king came from, the one you killed in battle yesterday. He cast a spell over me and sold me to the troll. Now that he's dead, I will have my kingdom back. You and I will be neighbor kings, but we must never wage war against one another." And they never did. They were friends as long as they lived, and visited each other quite often. Ouch. Okay, Cubs. I think that's all I'm going to read for the night. I almost got us to the 2-hour mark. Um, Let me check just to see what the next story might be, because okay, the next one's 10 pages long. I'll go ahead and wait for that until next time. Anyway, Cubs, back to me. So, let me see. Oh, I don't want to write. Pang of Singing, Sly and Giraffe are playing. What are they playing? Resident Evil 5. Shadow Moon is playing Warrants. What is Bradley playing up to? Bradley playing. What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? Okay. They haven't changed their title, but it looks like they're playing. Um, don't know what the title of the game is. Don't play it. Well, I haven't played it. What else is on? Oh, I'll hit up Sly. Not that I'm not lurking in hers anyway. Okay. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna red Sly. Just because I'm weird. Okay, so let's just raid's fine. Raid. Alright, well, thank you for hanging out, I guess. And, have a good evening. Let's go watch her and Jeff kill stuff. Night Cubs. Click. There we go.